And so let's think about what's going to be involved here in the edit action. So remember our table. We're going to find by email, and then we're going to authenticate the user based on the activation token. So we're going to do something like this. Find by email. It'll be in the params, as we'll see. That's from this here. That's what this gives us, this key value pair. And then we're going to say something like if the user exists and user.authenticated based on the activation token and the params of, well, that's this here. This is params of ID. Something like this. This is just a sketch. Else, this shouldn't happen too often, but then we'll just we'll handle an invalid activation link. Let's compare this to logging in. This is in the sessions controller. You can see we've got the same kind of thing. We're finding by email based on something in the params, and then if user and user.authenticated. So this is authenticate, but now we're using the authenticated question mark method that we wrote here for the remember token. But if you look at this, it says authenticated of remember token, and here we've got a symbol activation and then the actual token. So we're going to have to change the user model here. We're going to have to change authenticated to account for this use here. So this will not work right now, but I just want to give you a sketch of where we're going. Let's take another look at the authenticated question mark method to see where we are. Right, so in fact, let's move this over here. So this is the current usage, authenticated question mark of remember token, and what we want is authenticated question mark of a symbol, which will tell us the kind of token and then the token itself. So the first thing there is the attribute, and then we want it to be the token. So let's take a look at a console. I can show you how this works. This is going to be our first example of what's called metaprogramming, which is essentially programs that write programs. Ruby is really good at metaprogramming. In fact, much of the magic of Rails comes from its use of Ruby's metaprogramming facilities. So what we want here is a method that authenticates a different token against a different digest based on the value of this attribute. So let me show you how to build this up. Let's make an array here. Let's call a method on this array. Let's do a.length. There's a second way to do this. In the language of object-oriented programming, what this does is send the length method to the array A, and we can actually make that more explicit like this. We can call the send method directly, and then give it a symbol corresponding to the name of the method. So you can see that's the same thing, and in fact it works with a string as well. Let's look at this in the context of a user. We could do something like this. Let's take a look at the activation digest of that user. That's basically the kind of thing we expected, but let's take a look at this. We can do user.send, and then the symbol activation digest. It's the same thing. We can also do the string activation digest. And so now I think you might see where I'm going with this. If we change this to a double-quoted string, we can do this. We can interpolate the symbol activation like that. So if we make this an attribute, we can just interpolate that variable into here. So going up here, we can see that we've got attribute token. And now instead of tying this to the remember digest, we can do this. And then we can return false if digest is nil. And here, this is going to be new password called on digest, and then this is going to be token. And save that and see what happens to our tests. We've got an error here in the user test. Let's take a look at that. It's not that surprising. So what happened here is we've got an authenticated question mark method. And this is based on the old usage where it was a remember token by default, so we can just give it a symbol corresponding to the kind of token, and that should pass now. Great, and let's do this. See, we've got a couple errors. This second one here is in the sessions helper. I mean, this is one of those situations where it's just incredibly useful to have tests, just to be able to track down all these little places. So in this case, we've got a call to authenticated here. So we need to give this remember symbol. And that might be the only thing, I'm not sure. Yeah, there we go. So now our test suite is green.